Ah, the cinema. The escapist fantasy for people who don't like words. The most current and effective way to stream narrative directly into your head brain. Like me, you're probably at home, unshowered, contemplating why you'll ever wear anything that isn't a moisture-wicking polyester blend fabric ever again. It's in these trying times that we pick up our phones, call up the social media app of choice, and ask our closest ones, our casual acquaintance, and sometimes complete strangers, I finished the Tiger Show. What else is there to watch? Well, my sweet quarantine darlings, I've thought not so long and relatively off the top of my head a list of flicks, films, and motion pictures to relieve you from the scary, scary world existing right outside your window. And wow, is it scary out there. So here's my gift to you. 10 movies to watch this week while you're at home. Because there's no end in sight to this madness. If you've talked to me in the last 6 years, chances are these choices will come as no surprise to you. Chances are I have mentioned these to you in some shape or fashion. When I like something, I like something. I am leaving the most obvious one off the list, that being the 2000 Canadian film Ginger Snaps. Because if I haven't urged you to watch the best horror movie of the aughts by now, I don't know what else I need to say to you. So let's dive into this list and see what I've kind of come up with. Number 1, Eyes of Fire. Eyes of Fire is a 1983 supernatural horror movie about pioneer Christians who don't listen to anyone, except for patriarchal figures who make choices based off of their self-established erroneous beliefs, ignoring all warnings to the contrary, and the end result is lots of people dying. #relevant. The supernatural elements of Eyes of Fire are a mixture of, I would say, Gaelic and absolutely Native American mythology and folklore. The underlying message of the movie is don't fuck around with nature because it's more powerful and it will always win. The film is narrated by the youngest daughter of a group of settlers seeking a home for themselves in the New World. The eldest daughter is touched, which means she talks and acts like Jodie Foster and Nell. A wild child, if you will. However, she can, of course, tap into the mystical energy of the world around her. The group on their journey cross over into Native American grounds that are sacred, and in the process of doing so, awaken an elemental spirit. The spirit, rather than killing everyone off slasher style like a Michael Myers or a Jason Voorhees, instead uses fear and paranoia to drive the good majority of the people in this group mad. There's a dreamlike quality that surrounds this movie. In fact, you're probably going to hear me repeat that a lot with the movies on this list. It's kind of one of the reasons why I like them so much. The narrative floats and takes its time to unfold. The movie is more concerned about maintaining its mood than its plot. The visual effects in this movie are simple and effective, mostly maintained by, of all things, using negative film exposure when the spirit shows up, and when it's there, hand animating the eyes so that they glow in a very specific way. What this movie lacks in terms of plot, it makes up for tremendously through tone and atmosphere. Eyes of Fire is not commercially available, however, you can watch it for free and in its entirety here on YouTube. I will provide a link to it in the description below. Number 2, The Keep. Michael Mann is a guy that directs slow-paced movies. So slow that you could probably fall asleep during them. I know I have. The Keep is Michael Mann's follow-up to the massive hit that was Thief, starring James Caan. Remember when Kevin Smith made Mallrats immediately after doing Clerks? It's a lot like that. It's the perfect example of how you can trip up after finding immediate, tremendous success. Now, I know some of you are probably saying, why describe a movie you want us to watch like that? Why did I say that like Jerry Seinfeld? Much like Eyes of Fire, there's a tone to this movie that I feel is absolutely intoxicating. Tone and mood and character development always win over plot beats and advancing the story in my book. The Keep is set in 1941, as the Axis powers are trying to make their big military advance into Russia. It didn't work out too well for them in real life, and it certainly doesn't work out for them in this movie. A battalion of Nazi dickholes on the march stop to invade a strategic pass that they find in a Romanian village. The Nazis' asshole commander, played perfectly by Gabriel Byrne, orders his troops to set up inside the pass's fortress. That fortress is littered with crosses! Like, the kind of amount of crosses that are just like, clearly you don't want to come in here because there's some crazy shit that we're trying to keep inside this place, but like Nazis are wont to do, they go inside and they fuck everything up by awakening an elemental spirit by the name of Molosar. Enter Glaken, played by Scott Glenn, whom, if you're me, you know him as FBI ADA Jack Crawford from Silence of the Lambs, but I'm going to bet that the majority of you probably know him better as Stick from Netflix Daredevil. In fact, the character Glenn plays in this movie is actually a lot like Stick. He is the current in a long line of knights slash slayers slash ghostbusters meant to fight and keep Molosar imprisoned. Glaken lives that tortured life, torn between wanting to be his own person and dedication to a crippling duty based on his vow of protection. That can be a weary device, but Scott Glenn is such a great actor. He plays it with such conviction. The kind of conviction that in 1983, you normally would never see applied to a genre film. There's an alternate reality where this film got to its finished form. Special effects designer Wally Weavers died during post-production, which left Michael Mann kind of on his own to figure out how he was going to finish the special effects. And that was only one of many bad things that happened during production of this movie. Filming went months past its initial finish date. Michael Mann's first draft of the movie was several hours long. Couple that with several poorly received test screenings, the flick was taken away from Michael Mann and chopped down from 3.5 hours to 96 minutes. Chopping a 3.5 hour movie down to 90 minutes, it adds a very strange, unintentional, floaty, dreamy kind of effect. We go in and out of the story, very much in the same way that I feel like dream logic works. You know, you still have a story being told, but the way you get in and out of scenes isn't necessarily conventional. I also have to say that the amazing soundtrack by Tangerine Dream helps cement that effect into the movie. The Keep is also not relatively commercially available. Short of its initial dump onto VHS in the mid-80s and a few repeats on HBO or Cinemax, it's never really been commercially available since then. There's no DVD, there's no Blu-ray. You can purchase it off of iTunes and Amazon Prime, but you're basically going to be getting a dub of the VHS. I still recommend you watch it. I'm really curious to see if other people kind of feel the same way I feel about its dreamlike quality. And it also applies to Eyes of Fire as well. Number 3, Tusk. Oh boy. Oh, Kevin. Tusk is a 2014 movie written and directed by Kevin Smith based off of an episode of one of his podcasts. In short, Tusk is a movie about one guy trying to turn another guy into a walrus. In 2010, Kevin Smith famously said that he was going to retire from directing movies after his movie Red State. Smith was growing a very popular and successful podcasting empire at the time. His love affair with making movies was at an all-time low, while his frustration with making them was at an all-time high. We then cut to 2013, where Smith is recording an episode of his flagship podcast, Smodcast, which he hosts with his longtime producer, Scott Mosier. Smith and Mosier recounted a news article that absolutely captured their imaginations. Basically, it was a one ad from a Canadian-style Craigslist. In the advertisement, a man was seeking a roommate. The roommate could live in this person's large house, rent-free, all expenses paid, so long as for 1 to 2 hours a day, said roommate would dress up and act like a walrus. So Smith and Mosier ran with this story for the next 90 minutes, basically saying how this was a horror movie waiting to happen. The one ad was later on discovered to be a joke and completely not serious. But it already captured Smith's imagination, and you can hear in that episode, you can hear the gears turning, you can hear Smith talking and becoming more and more enthused that this was a horror movie. 1 year later, almost to the day, we received the movie Tusk. I've never seen a movie like Tusk before. Ever. I applaud this flick for being so abso-fucking-lutely bizarre as its premise promises. That's both a good and a bad thing. Smith reteams with his lead actor from Red State, Michael Phelps, and gives this incredible actor pages of delightful dialogue, monologues that he just recites beautifully. There's a slow build to legit terror as the body horror elements of this story start to take place. The unwilling recipient of all of this is actor Justin Long, who you might remember from those Mac commercials from the early 2000s. And all of this comes from the guy that directed Mallrats. I will say that there is a point in the movie where it takes a turn to the comedy that you would expect from Kevin Smith, and I feel like that majorly detracts from the tale of the story. There's a very specific actor that appears in this, which also kind of derails the movie a bit. You know who this man is, you know he's under a really ridiculous prosthetic nose, and it's kind of hard to not laugh at the movie once it starts going down this route. And it's a shame because like the 50 minutes leading up to that are spectacular. I promise you, you will never see a movie as strange as Tusk. I promise you. It's a movie about a guy that turns another guy into a walrus. Number 4, Shivers. Hey, if you didn't think either David Lynch or David Cronenberg wasn't going to make this list, then clearly you have never hung out with somebody that went to film school. Since we are living through a pandemic, why not recommend a movie that's sort of about a pandemic? This is one of Cronenberg's earliest movies. It's part zombie movie, but it's also at the same time part pod people, invasion of the body snatchers type of movie. It's also the movie that, at the time, made the Canadian government seriously reconsider its Citizens Art Grant program. The movie follows the residents of a swanky, modern, at the time, apartment building in an unnamed metropolitan city, all of whom are slowly taken over by these parasitic slug-like creatures. And once these slug creatures have entered your body by crawling down your throat, they infect you, turning all of your inhibitions loose, making anybody they infect a violence-craving, sex-mad fiend. Morale, right? Whether it's zombies or the Borg from Star Trek, any concept that strips away individualism or your humanity always really kind of gets underneath my skin. It makes me feel uncomfortable. Then when you go ahead and replace it with an aberration of what you consider a human being to be, I don't know, that like doubly gets me and kind of leaves me relatively unsettled in a way that I don't normally get. It's like once something becomes so large and so powerful that you can't stop its progress and you're kind of doomed to succumb to it. You know, like I said, whether it's zombies or the Borg, or in this case, parasitic slug aliens that turn you into a sex fiend, it's just all equally terrifying. And Shivers has several moments of pure shock value. Like, it's one of the few movies that have left me feeling, well, I am shook after seeing it. And for it being so early in the career of a director who's just known for body horror, who's just known for just unsettling an audience, it's a very clear example of what we were going to get later on down the line from Cronenberg. Number 5, Inferno. Burn, baby, burn. Dario Argento, burn, baby, burn. Dario Argento. You know, there's a line in Jane Robinson's Starman comic book where Jack Knight says to the Shade, "I'm the only person in this town that probably likes the Two Jakes more than Chinatown." And that's me in Inferno. I love this movie so much more than Suspiria. The first 10 minutes of this movie are out of this world good. It's silent, and it takes place in a gorgeous hotel that's also submerged underneath the water, and it's underneath the streets of New York City. And it's such a gorgeous experience. The sound design on it too is just delightful. You hear just moving water and rushes, and everything kind of has that like underwater sound to it. Argento also carries over the extreme color palette that Suspiria had, but replaces it with more blues and pinks and purples and kind of like this. Like this is what Inferno looks like. This is the second of Argento's Three Mothers film cycle, the first being Suspiria, the third being Mother of Tears, but don't ever watch that movie. It's really bad. Inferno is not a direct sequel to Suspiria. It's more of a parallel story. You know how like there's like Twilight Princess and A Link to the Past, and they're all Zelda titles, but they're basically telling different stories. It's kind of like that. And we jump around globally, but mostly this movie is set in America, where Mater Tenebrarum has laid claim in the city that never sleeps. Inferno follows the usual Italian giallo-gloved killer / supernatural horror that Argento very much defined. And one of the dreamy things about Inferno is that it is pure style over substance. There is no main character in this movie, as opposed to Jessica Harper's character in Suspiria. We follow this tale over the course of 3 people, all of who are interconnected, but neither one really takes the main stage as the lead. I guess you could say the character of Mark is, just simply because he's the person that confronts the witch at the end of the movie. But whoa! What was that? Wow. Bossy. But none of that really matters. I don't feel like a whole lot of that really matters in Argento movies. I really believe that he is much more efficient when he works as a visual storyteller. Also helped carrying this movie is the bitching score by the E and ELP Keith Emerson. Oh man, progressive rock is a perfect pair for Argento's visual style. It's delightful, it's awesome, it's synthy, but it's progressive rock at its absolute righteousness. And in its prime too. 1980 was the great time for Rush and ELP and all of those bands. It's so good. An interesting side note to this movie, while filming, Dario Argento contracted a wicked case of hepatitis, which basically led to him being in pain all of the time, laying on his back while directing scenes. Funny. Number 6, Pulse. In the midst of Japan's modern horror renaissance? What? In the midst of Japan's horror renaissance of the late 1990s into the early 2000s, Pulse was largely overlooked as an imported movie as well as a remake, Koshi Kurosawa's ghost story about suicide and isolation is bleak and nihilistic. Large swaths of people slowly begin to take their lives in Tokyo. It becomes an epidemic that begins to spread all across Japan and ultimately goes worldwide in some suicide-inducing virus. These deaths are determined to be the result of interactions with an unknown entity that exists online. This movie's 2000, 2001, so the internet is pretty much still in its infancy. It's discovered that the dead are very angry with the living. As technology grows and grows and grows, and our interaction becomes more and more distant, and we forget what it's like to be in large groups of people enjoying our lives. Anyway, the dead basically decide that, if we're going to spend the rest of our lives distancing ourselves from each other with technology, and we're not going to actually enjoy our lives, then damn it, they're going to take that away from us. This is a haunting ghost story for our times right now. As we are all in isolation, under quarantine, I'm sure there are a great deal of people that are feeling that kind of paranoia and loss and fear, being trapped inside your own house. But aside from that, there are some truly horrific moments that involve ghosts in this movie. Oh my god, there's one scene that I will skip over any time that I have watched this movie. There's a ghost that's introduced in a very specific way. I have to assume that it's filmed backwards, because when you film a scene backwards and then you replay it, your brain knows that it's not right, so it's kind of just like, ooh, no, I don't like that at all. Whenever I watch that scene, there's a fight or flight kind of instinct that kicks in. I just want to reject it terribly. It's like walking down a dark path in the woods and you hear some rustling off in the distance, and you don't know what that is, but you're sure as shit not going to stick around to find out. There are some eloquent and very poignant ideas put forth in Pulse. I feel like it's really worth anybody's time right now to kind of watch it and compare to what we're seeing right now, and the perils of what things like, misinformation on Facebook and getting into arguments on Twitter kind of drag us all down on a daily basis these days. Oh, and also there's a ghost that gets a really eloquent, very insightful monologue in this movie, and you really don't see that a whole lot in horror films. Number 7, The Devil's Rain. That's Rain, R-A-I-N, not, you know what I mean. I'm going to say something to you right now. Buy this movie. Rent this movie. Whatever. Cue it up. Sit down. And buckle the fuck in. Does this movie have haunting desert imagery? Check. Does this movie have William Shatner, post-Star Trek but pre-T.J. Hooker, being his most absolute Shatnery? Check. Does this movie have Ernest Borgnine as the leader of a cult? Check. Does this movie feature the founder of the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey, who also acts in an advisory capacity behind the scenes to ensure accuracy in all rituals performed in this film? Check. This movie, to me, is the epitome of an Italian chef kissing his fingers from his lips to the air. It's the perfect encapsulation of the satanic panic and just the occult craze of the mid-1970s. Ernest Borgnine is the reincarnation of a devil-worshipping Puritan who was killed in 1700 Salem and has been reincarnated seeking revenge on the descendants of the people that killed him. If that sentence doesn't make you stop this video immediately to watch that movie, I don't know what will. Please don't stop watching this video. We've got Shatner. We've got Borgnine. We've got a young Tom Skerritt, which, if you pretend real hard, this movie could be a prequel to Picket Fences. There's also Hollywood icon, actress-director Ida Lupino. Green Acres star Eddie Albert is in this movie. Eddie Albert! And in a blink and you will miss it, absolutely wordless role under heavy prosthetic makeup is a young John Travolta in his first feature film role. Can I say something about this movie to you? It slaps. There is such great makeup work in this flick, like creature effects that are on Ernest Borgnine. He turns into like a goat man at one point. Wow! All of the cult members have their eyes ritualistically gouged out, so they're just gangs of people with like eyeless sockets, and it all looks good. Like, yeah, sure, clearly we know that, like, you know, it's a prosthetic piece, but on the whole, like, it looks pretty good. And bodies melt in the climax of this movie, like dripping, melting wax bodies. This movie is absolutely fantastic. I love this movie so much. It is so good. And not since The Sixth Sense has a movie had a climactic twist so shocking than The Devil's Reign. Number 8. Dracula's Daughter. Let's go classical with this next entry. Did you know that there was a direct sequel to the 1931 Bela Lugosi Dracula movie? I don't know what it was about the Universal classic horror movies and their sequels. I've watched all of them so many times, and I've always felt that the sequels, or at least the direct sequels, are often infinitely better than any of the originals that preceded it. You can definitely say that about the Lugosi Dracula in this movie. Bride of Frankenstein is infinitely better than Frankenstein, just simply due to the fact that, you know, it has a great score and it has some tremendous dark humor. Revenge of the Creature, I mean, really pins down the idea that man is more the creature than the Gill Man ever is. And even The Invisible Man Returns tops the Claude Rains version. And I think that's just simply due to the fact that they cast Vincent Price, who's a natural for the genre. There's a modern, at the time, gothic take on Dracula's Daughter. It's more metropolitan, more New York, than, despite its London setting. Whereas the London of the Lugosi Dracula, I feel like it feels more in line with the era that exists inside Stoker's novel. And in fact, that modernist take is what's so consistent throughout the Universal horror movie sequels. It's comparable to like Batman the Animated Series, where the time period is... It feels old but futuristic at the same exact time, kind of giving everything this agelessness. The other key thing about this movie is its overt themes of homosexuality. Gloria Holden's character of Countess Zaleska, the eponymous Dracula's daughter, is not only an outcast socially because she is a vampire, she's an outcast because she's gay. For a movie made during the Hays Code being strictly enforced in Hollywood, there are some strong scenes of seduction in this movie. Being made in 1936, you know, homosexuality was such a social taboo. It was just considered to be a mental illness. Despite the lack of social acceptance, Universal actually used that angle while promoting the flick. It's really strange to see taglines of "She gives you that weird feeling" and "Save the women of London from Dracula's daughter." I guess there really was no such thing as bad publicity, even back then. Dracula's Daughter follows Countess Zaleska, who intimately feels the death of her father. She comes to London to basically wrap up his affairs, but also at the same exact time destroy his body in the hope that it releases her of her vampirism. Basically, it's the premise that if you kill the head vampire, everyone else under its influence will be released. While she succeeds at destroying Dracula's body, she is still under his control. So she starts to seek the help from a doctor who she kind of wants to turn into a vampire. And then also gets the hots for his fiancée, who she kind of wants to turn into a vampire even more. I really dig the performance by Gloria Holden in this movie. It is so counter to what Lugosi did. Lugosi is so big and large. Her performance is so quiet and reserved and tortured. She struggles with the idea of wanting to be normal, but also really, really enjoying being a vampire. The scenes where she seduces the character of Janet, it's kind of surprising to see something like that get away in 1936. There is no way that I believe that, I would say 9 out of 10 people could watch that scene and not think that it was more of her trying to hook up with her rather than Zaleska trying to suck Janet's blood. This movie's popular cultural influence, while not as grand as the Lugosi Dracula, still has some major impact as far as popular culture. For better or worse, Gloria Holden's performance and appearance in Dracula's Daughter quickly became queer coding in media for high society or femme fatale lesbians. You can even see this movie's influence in the writings of Anne Rice throughout her vampire novels. In fact, she even names a nightclub Dracula's Daughter in, I believe, Queen of the Damned. Dracula's Daughter is a great movie. It's a gem that is oftentimes overlooked inside the vast pantheon that is the Universal Classic Horror series. Number 9, Dagon. This flick's a perennial favorite, and unfortunately timely due to the death of director Stuart Gordon. His career as a filmmaker is intimately tied to the stories of H.P. Lovecraft. Dagon, more than any other film he's made, is the truest to story adaptation of any Lovecraft work. Dagon is a straight telling of the Lovecraft short story Shadow over Innsmouth. Innsmouth? I always say Innsmouth, but I'm probably wrong. The major difference in this story is that it replaces the characters of the Deep Ones with the eponymous underwater deity from another Lovecraft story. A young man named Paul, played by Ezra Godden, who is like a perfect mixture of Jeffrey Combs and Bruce Campbell, is sailing off the coast of Spain while vacationing with friends. During a storm, they are stranded and take refuge in the small town of Imboca. Clearly, there is something wrong with the town folks of Imboca, mostly the fact that they are human-fish hybrids and worship a sea god. Gordon and company do a lot of great work with the tone of this movie. When I think of Lovecraft's description of Innsmouth in my head, Imboca, the town in the movie, really captures a lot of that visual feel. It's dilapidated, worn down, isolated, old, all because they've been waiting a century for the next phase of humanity to begin. When you've been in the independent film industry as long as someone as Stuart Gordon has, he really knows where to make the most of and where to use his very modest $250,000 budget. There's a lot of great, simple makeup on actors, and oh my god, there is a grisly death of one of the leads that is just top-notch gore effects. While right now you may want to remember Stuart Gordon by popping in your copy of Reanimator, nobody has physical media anymore. It's like when I still say I taped a show. After you've gone through Herbert West's wacky adventures, I highly suggest giving Dagon a spin. You can clearly see the labor of love that Stuart Gordon has had his whole career for H.P. Lovecraft, and it's embedded indefinitely into this flick. Stuart, rest in peace. Number 10, Evil Cat. The final movie I'm going to recommend in this video is unfortunately unavailable commercially or illegally. This played in October at Exhumed Films 24-hour Horror-thon in Philadelphia. All that's really out there right now are overpriced bootlegs that are available on eBay. The movie in question that I'm discussing is the 1987 Hong Kong action horror movie Evil Cat. Evil Cat has a very similar presence to The Keep. An ancient evil has been imprisoned, and a family has been tasked to guard it generation after generation throughout the course of the demon's 9 lives. Because it's a cat. An evil cat. When the demon's tomb is opened up by construction workers, it re-begins its reign of murder and chaos across modern-day Hong Kong. Unfortunately, the current existing guardian is an old man who is dying from cancer, and he has refused to train his young daughter Tina, who is also a TV news reporter, to be the next in line of succession of defending the world against an evil cat. Instead, the Guardian chooses to train a slacker by the name of Long, who has the hots for his daughter, but he's also happened to discover that his boss, a rich business tycoon, is currently the host of the evil demon cat. There is a heavy new wave feel to this movie. It's like Depeche Mode's video for Strangelove. I need more current references. I'm sorry. I'm 42. And based off the stunts and the fight sequences, I would actually really consider this movie to be a contemporary to something like John Woo's Hard Boiled. What I also really dig about this movie is its sense of humor. Like, it knows its premise is goofy, so it just has an absolute ball telling itself, almost as much fun as we do watching it. The character of Long is very much like Ash from the Evil Dead series. He's dopey, he's cowardly, and as reluctant to be a hero as any protagonist could possibly be. But Long is in love with Tina, and as long as he gets the chance to prove himself to her, and possibly get his dick wet, it's all he really needs to step up to the plate and be the hero. Evil Cat has some great stunt work, as I said earlier. When the cat has possessed Long's boss, there is some excellent wirework and acrobatics to make him feel like he actually has the agility and the movement of a cat. There's nothing I appreciate more than great practical stunt work, and this movie delivers it in spades. There's also a decapitation in this movie that is spectacular. It's another great practical effect, and all it is just sleight of hand. And when it happened, it got such a great pop in the movie theater. We all just really appreciated it. And so there we go. 10 movies that you didn't have before that are absolutely 100% worth your time. And this is just part 1. I was originally going to do 20 movies, but then I thought that would be a really long video to make. So let's split it up, and that way I get twice the content. So come back next time where I'll have 10 more movies for you to check out, because it's not like sports will be back on anytime soon, and it's not like we'll be out of this anytime sooner, and this is just life, I guess, now. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share it, subscribe to the channel. I mean, I showered and I put on makeup for you people. It's the least that you can do. I've been your favorite former twink, and I'll see you in the next one. So, who do I have to talk to about opening up a tab?